Per se. Oh, well, that's a good reason. No chance of getting out. How about the rest of you on the first day or two doing? Was that? It's the first day. First for you as well? Yeah. And have you had classes this morning? Earlier?
Oh, yeah, I had earlier in TESL.
Okay.
Then I have the next summer.
All TESL classes or other?
TESL classes.
Okay, so you already had
Um,
301. Who's it with? Oh, with John. Okay, fantastic. Then what's later the fact?
Yeah, Olympic.
Okay. How about you with all of your classes in here? Same thing, you have the class with John?
I had that. And I had that.
Back. Okay. All in this room. Amazing. You're getting the whole TESL sampler. This Tuesday, Thursday. Anybody feeling like not ready to go into the fall semester? Meaning, no, I'm not, or yes, I am. You're not. When did you get back? Oh, I haven't. For a full year, having been there. Oh, what? So, what were you like? Tell us a little bit more about that. Okay. No, I haven't. Okay. Mm-hmm. And definitely wanting to teach abroad, or yeah, okay. Was it in an English medium school, or taking the students were taking English classes as part of their?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were
Okay. Yeah, sure. Do you speak French then?
I learned it for like getting into the program.
Wow.
But I was
Yeah. Wow. No training other than that. Mm. Okay. Wow, what an experience. Okay. Very cool.
I'd like to.
Do you think you would like to teach in other parts of the world rather other than just Europe, or? Do it. Yeah, sure. There's one thing at a time, right? Hi, welcome. We'll do more like comprehensive introductions once everyone gets here. So that's why I didn't say like, you know, tell us like, but we'll get there. Just a few minutes will allow. It's only 10 o'clock's always fine. So this one's probably better. We'll give it a couple more minutes for some more of your topics. I think we are 11 in this class. So let me double check. 11 and 1, I think is after today. Okay. Probably one to one. How's your breakdown of like in-person classes, online classes, hybrid classes? Is it seeming similar to last year or more moving in a different direction? I'm curious. That's how the difference.
This is my first time taking a hybrid,
Okay.
so I'm experiencing this semester.
Okay. Fantastic. So last say like in the last year you had mostly online, mostly in person.
The spring I was in person and it was in this classroom.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it was better for in person,
Mhm.
but I like it online remote more for me
Okay.
because
It's just convenient.
yeah.
That's what a lot of students just say, like that
Yeah.
they like to have an in-person class, but the convenience of remote or online is also helpful for students are working, you've got a lot of things on your plate. So I think the university still is really trying to figure out what's the right balance, what do students need at this moment in their life, what's working best for learning, etc. Other thoughts on what your ideal situation would be?
I'm still trying to navigate the hybrid situation. Because on some days, Tuesday, Thursday, I'm in person. And then on Thursdays, it's the not in person. So I have no time in between like my morning class and my evening class. And I just don't want to go home for that. So I'll probably be doing my homework here.
Yeah.
Possibly doing it in person.
Okay, yeah, it can be tricky, like when, you know, when everything was online, that's one thing, but then once, you know, I know, especially fall of last year, I know a lot of students were really struggling with, I'm here for in-person classes, but then my other professors want me on Zoom, so it can be even just hard to find a place to quiet place to go, to tap on that Zoom call. There are, you know, like some rooms in the library that are specifically for that. And honestly, if you have a hybrid class, you're frequently assigned a classroom, so you can actually just go to that classroom, even like the class is meeting, you know, on Zoom for that week or for that day. But yeah, it's kind of a weird breakdown. Well, and we'll talk more about the structure of the hybrid for this class, because even hybrid is it's a term that can be interpreted multiple ways. So the specifics of the structure of a hybrid class can look different from one class to another. So we'll look at specifically what that looks like. Well, maybe we should go ahead and get started. This class is at 1:40, right? Not 1:45. I think that's right. I'll take attendance in a minute when we go ahead and introduce ourselves. But welcome, this is TESL 341, so hopefully you're in the right place. It's Principles of Language. Welcome. We're just getting started. So on our agenda for this week, we'll do some class introduction. We'll go over the syllabus and our course shell in D2L, so I can kind of walk you through some more pieces of how this class will be structured, how our weeks will be structured, what you can expect, and plenty of time for asking questions. We'll do a little bit of an overview of Larson, Freeman, and Anderson, Chapter 1, and Brown, Chapter 1. Those are the readings for this week. And if you haven't had a chance to order your textbooks yet, that's okay. They're PDFs online in the Week 1 folder on D2L. So you can read those, and they're available to you now. Next week's readings are also posted as PDFs, but please do order your textbooks now, because after the second week, I won't provide those PDFs. I'll assign you or talk to you briefly about the mini paper, which is your first major assignment, although it's not a huge paper, so that's called a mini paper, but we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get into sort of the meat of those things, I'd like to learn a little bit about you. So if everyone could tell us their preferred name, how you would like to be called in this class, as well as your preferred pronouns. The ages or grades that you plan to teach, maybe you're teaching now, sort of what your goals are, the group of students that you imagine yourself teaching at the end of your training. And then maybe just a fun fact about you, something that's interesting, something that you would like us to know that helps us to get a little bit of insight into who you are. So I will go first. My name is Annie Gill Lawyer. I will be the instructor for your course. Most of us in the TESL program are fairly casual, so you can call me by my first name, which is Annie. I'm very comfortable with that. Sometimes students aren't especially comfortable in calling their instructor by their first name. So if you're not, that's okay. You can call me Ms. Gill Lawyer or Professor. I'm not a doctor. I have a master's in TESL. So Dr. Gill is not actually appropriate for me, but any of the above is fine. And my pronouns are she, her. I teach adults. I teach adults like yourselves who are training to teach English, as well as I direct Northeastern's intensive English program, which is called the TESL program. It's an acronym that stands for the School for the Advancement of English Language and Learning. But it's basically a full-time academic English program, mostly serving international students who come to eventually go on to a bachelor's program, a master's program, sometimes even a PhD program, but they need to raise their academic English proficiency before they're ready for those programs. So I direct that program. And a fun fact about me. I'm also what's called a master gardener, which means that I'm a trained volunteer horticulture educator in the community. I used to actually work in horticulture before I changed careers to teaching English. And so this is really still my very favorite time of year when I am outside a lot, working in my vegetable garden. I planted some plum and a sour cherry tree in my yard about 7 or so years ago. And this year is the first year we've had like a big bumper crop. So like I've got plums like you wouldn't believe right now. So that's just a little something kind of about me. Would someone like to go next? Great. Oh, now, when you say elementary, that's a wide range. Do you have like a smaller, couple of grades that you think maybe you might be interested in? Okay. Great. Like you said, lovely. Yeah, lovely. Can I ask you where did you start? How did your parents choose this name? That's cute. It's just, my son, his name is Rivers, Rivers, and someone asked, he's 14, just started high school, and someone at his high school asked him during like one of the orientation weeks, why do they call you Rivers? And he was like, it's my name. And so I think too, like, I don't know how many other lovelies you've met in the world, but there's two, really? Two in addition to you, or you and one other? Okay, so thank you, lovely. Who would like to go next?
Great. My name is Star. My pronouns are she and her. Age that I plan to teach somewhere between birth and third grade. I am thinking it was all kids. Fun fact, but
Sorry.
I used to teach in museums with one friend. So I taught in museums for also my master gardener. This is the first time I understand.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And someone I'm going to go next? Please.
My name is Manuel Covela. I go by Mandy. Currently, no ages or race plan. I'm taking TESL for a backup, just in case my major doesn't succeed. I taught 5 years in the middle school. Well, not thought, I worked 5 years in middle school as technology assistant. It was a great job. Fun fact, I know how to fix computers and stuff.
You shared a lot of those kinds of experiences in that. Like, and you, I don't know, wait, maybe I just said this time, but that your undergraduate major is anthropology. That was my major.
That's my
actually,
major, yes, anthropology.
in undergraduate. I came out feeling like so much knowledge, not a lot of skills. Which I don't.
That's why I have a backup.
Yeah, that's true of all anthropology majors, but it's good to have the minor.
Yeah.
It's good to have that backup. Thanks, Manny. Anyone else? Good.
I'm honestly, I have major, but I don't know what major to teach at. For the school, because I didn't know what kind of conversation with them. Background, I speak 4 languages.
Which are?
English, Bulgarian, French, and
That's it. Four people I haven't heard from yet. Would you mind?
Okay, my name is Mandy. My pronouns are she and her. My major's early childhood. So like, I'm not really sure what I would be, what grades I want to really teach yet. So, yeah. And a fun fact about me is that I like gardening, but like, last year and this year, the seeds I grow is only sprouts and they all die.
Oh,
So,
shame.
yeah.
Maybe it's a mistake.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
hard to say.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
my name is Valentina. My pronouns are she or her. I majored in education and I teach probably third or fourth grade.
Okay.
Fun fact, I do speak 3 languages. My main language is Assyrian. I also speak Arabic and English. Other things I would like to do, I just like going to carnivals, festivals, rides, stuff.
What did you go to this summer?
Somewhere I've been to so many different carnivals, like city carnivals, played and collected plushies and the like.
Maybe from one of these two next year? Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to, I would tell what education is. I would teach each practice and practice that I
Any particular, like, right now I'm really listening to this a lot. Really everything. Okay. Thank you.
My name is Angel. I'm from Ethan. I don't have like a specific like ages or grades that I teach, but like I prefer like when they're like teenagers or older.
Okay.
I can't really see myself being like able to handle like smaller kids.
Okay.
It's easier than you think. So much fun.
About me is that I'm like currently trying to like learn Japanese.
Oh.
So yeah, it's like gives like a perspective from like learning how to like teach it and as well as like being like a student.
Why Japanese?
I don't know. It was just like it was like an option to present itself.
Okay.
Like classes,
Uh-huh.
and I sort of stuck with it.
Very cool. And you got a little Japanese, right?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe this is.
You remembered.
Wow. Ishara?
my name is Shara. My pronouns are she, her. The grade I plan on teaching. So last semester,
Oh.
I wanted to teach like younger people. So I didn't want to.
Okay. Why? What's happening that encouraged you this direction?
Student teaching.
No, I was going to teach that
Oh, whereas teens are so never irritated.
My patience is that I'm not good.
Okay.
I like to try to.
Yeah, that's what I'm back to.
Well, it's great to meet you all. We are going to be spending every Tuesday together, so I'm really looking forward to it, as well as and we'll be spending online together. So I'm so glad to see everyone in this room. I think we're missing 2 people today, so maybe one of them. Since it is our first class together, I thought it might be a good idea to take a little bit of time to go over the syllabus. It's, I mean, admittedly kind of long. So I won't go, you know, you're all adults who know how to read, very well, I'm pretty sure of it. You've come this far in the world. But maybe some of the key things that also work. So and this is available obviously on D12. Well, I added one thing to the syllabus today, which was just that I realized I hadn't included the Zoom link for office hours, so I updated that. So if you downloaded it at some earlier point, you can drop that. And now it does. But the most important thing that you should probably know about this class is that it is being offered in a hybrid format, which means that we will meet about half of the time every Tuesday. The Tuesday at this time in this room, we will be here in person. The Thursday class meeting for this class won't happen. It won't happen in this room. It won't happen on Zoom. There will be no synchronous second class meeting each week. Instead, what you'll be having are asynchronous online activities and assignments. Usually that's going to look like a discussion board post and replying to some classmates' posts, or something called a video annotation. Raise your hand if you've used video ant before. So some of you have and others of you haven't. It's very easy. The first time that you do it, I'll have very clear instructions on D2L, but if you, there's a link in the week 0 folder for this class that takes you to video ant. So if you just want to go to it, you can create an account, or you can just log in with Google, with your Nmail Google account. And you'll see kind of how it works. There's a quick video tutorial that'll kind of show you. I've never had a student be like, I just can't figure out video ant. It's very intuitive and very straightforward. But you do have to be signed into it in order to annotate the video. So just think of that. If at some point you go to one of the video ants and you're like, how does this work? Just make sure you're signed in, and then you'll. So in general, the online asynchronous parts of the week are going to be due your original post or or annotation. Sometimes you might have both a discussion board and an annotation, but usually it's one or the other. Those original posts are typically going to be due on the Saturday of the week by 11:59 p.m. And then if there's any replies that I've asked you to do to your classmates, those are due by the Monday night. So that's just to give you a little bit of extra time to read your classmates' posts. If you want to do all of it at once, that's fine too. If you go in by, say Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you do your own post or your own annotation, and some of your classmates have already done theirs, go ahead and do your replies then. You're done. But I'll show you more in a minute. I won't read through all of this, but you should go back and make sure you read the syllabus in total, just to make sure you're clear on everything. But this course is an examination of theories and ideas related to teaching English as a second language or teaching foreign languages more generally. It's going to cover a variety of topics, including but not necessarily limited to the following: history of language teaching, politics of language teaching, learning theory, learning policy, classroom management, and basic research tools for language. This is 303. That is a mistake. There's just, you obviously knew how to get here, but it's 3003 for the classroom number. we'll meet Tuesdays at this time. My office hours are this Thursday. Basically the time that if we had a second class, meeting of the week, that's the time when you can either come to my office or I will always be in our Zoom office hours link at that time on Thursdays. So I'll always be in it. And if you just click into it and want to meet me there I will be. If that's not a good time with you, for you that is, just send me an email if you want to set up office hours at another time. Let me know and we can work that. I can meet with you again on Zoom, in person in my office, over the phone. Some other creative idea of a way we can meet. I'm open to that as well. So my office is. Oh yeah, in person LWH 0045. So I'm in the basement of this building, lower level. If you go down there near the international programs, that's where my office. This is my office phone number. Please don't try and text me on it. That happened one time where a student was texting me, but it's a landline, so don't try. There are these two books that you should order, Techniques and Principles of Language Learning and Teaching by Diane Larson-Freeman, as well as Principles of Language Learning and Teaching by Brown. We will be using both of them pretty extensively. And like I mentioned, there is for this week and next week, the readings are available as PDFs on D2L, but after that point, they won't be. So please do go ahead and order those. They're pretty easy to find, use, so I recommend that. There's also some copies available in the library. I don't encourage illegal activity, but I'm told that sometimes PDFs are available on the internet. Get through most of this, but our objectives in this class are these things. You're going to learn a lot about the history of second and foreign language teaching. You're going to come to understand some of the various methodologies that have been used in the teaching of second and foreign languages. We're looking a little bit at the politics of language education in this country. We'll become aware of various types of language programs available in this country. We'll understand how people learn in general and how they learn languages specifically. So we'll be learning a lot about our brains, how they work with regard to language, and how different ways of learning and teaching languages have been tried as a result of how we've understood our brains and learning process. And you'll come to understand the impact of various pedagogical choices that we've made about how to teach language. Some things that you'll be doing are reading the information presented in the text and other handouts. You will be, and this is the mini paper that will be the first thing to, as a major assignment in this class, interviewing someone who uses English as a second language, and writing a report about that learner's experience. You'll also be completing an experiential project that documents a semester-long self-directed language learning experience. So I'll go through that more extensively in a few weeks, but that's going to be a project you'll work on for about, I think it's an 8-week project, where you will choose a language which is new to you, and you will attempt to learn it on your own. We'll get into that later. There are 12 short online quizzes for this class, and your lowest score on 2 of them will be dropped. And then there's a midterm exam and a final exam. Both of those exams are take home, and you have about 2 weeks to work on. Oops. Let's see. Yeah, so the quizzes together will be 50 points. That mini paper I mentioned, 25 points. That self-directed language learning project will be 40 points. The midterms 40 points. The finals 40 points. And then your participation is a huge chunk, 60 points. So that includes attendance and participation in 14 in-person classes, 14 online asynchronous days. So the discussion boards or video and that portion of the week is worth 2 points as well. Week 12 that happens to be election day on the Tuesday, which is now a state holiday, so we won't be meeting week 12, November 8th. So instead, that week, there will be a little bit of extra online activity. So, I won't go through the course outline, that's mostly going to be covered in my prepared course stuff. Like I said, Tuesdays is in-person classes, but the second day of class is going to be asynchronous online. Most of this is pretty basic. You guys are great adults who know that just sitting on Instagram in the middle of class is not really a great way to participate. I trust that you're all very respectful to your classmates, that you'll be prepared by bringing your book and any other assigned materials. One thing you should know about late work. So the major assignments, so that includes the mini paper, the language learning journals, your midterm and your final, those have due dates. And for every day that they're submitted late, you'll lose 10% of possible points on those. However, you should know that your asynchronous activities don't have to be submitted on time. There's no credit given for late discussion boards or video games. Okay, so those are, and the reason is really important is that if you're, a week late and you go back and try to do those, it doesn't really contribute to the classroom conversation. The purpose of discussion boards and video games is that then we're having a classroom conversation in an online environment, not necessarily at the same time, but in the same week. And so if you're wanting to come back and do those later, it doesn't really contribute to the classroom conversation. So for those, no late credit is given. Be aware of that. You should do the reading for each class meeting before class. So in an ideal world, you would have read the chapters for today before today. I understand the first week of class, that's a little tough. Just read those as soon as you can before you go on to do, say, the discussion board. I think this is all pretty standard stuff. This is important to me. Make sure that you just understand the assignments completely. So if anything's just not clear to you, you're probably not going to do very well at it. So please bring those questions to me, either when we meet on Tuesdays, or come to my office hours, or send me an email. I try to be available to you as much as possible. Do check your NEIU email. Do go into D2L and look there for announcements to the course. They will post those there. As I said before, your attendance and participation are worth about a quarter of the full course grade. So please do come to class. It's important, and do those online asynchronous assignments as well. Let's go with yeah, let's shift now from looking at the syllabus. Okay, actually, as I shift from syllabus to the detailed course shell, what questions do you have so far? There are no silly questions. If you have a question, it's likely one of your colleagues here has the same question. So you should ask. Think of it. Please.
Your week 0, does that count for participation?
It does not. No, mostly that's just trying to make sure that you know how to use the tools that we'll be using in this class. But no, there's no thus far. The first anything that you'll do for points this week, well, besides being here today, is the online is the discussion board this week. So your initial course is Saturday, and then we're applied to so this is our course shell in D2L. This is the same kind of announcement at the beginning of the syllabus. You can read that, but most things are going to be here in the content tab. So we go over here. We can start with So there is this thing called week 0 in which I put a task list. And that was just to indicate to you, kind of like I just said, read the syllabus and course schedule, read through the major assignment descriptions and documents. So there's 2 major assignments. One is that mini paper that I mentioned, and then there's this self-directed language learning journal. In each one, you'll see there's individual folders with information on both of those things, like an assignment description, a short video of me explaining the assignment, a rubric, and a model paper. So some other earlier students' work that was exemplary that you can have a look at to kind of get an idea of what would this look like if I did this very well. So I recommend especially going through the one on the mini paper soon, because that's due September 12th. And it's basically, you're going to find someone in your life who, or that you know, a friend of a friend, someone who uses English as a second language, who learned English in addition to their first language at some point in their life. They may still be learning right now. They may, have learned English, starting as a child, and now they're your grandmother. That's fine. Anything along this whole spectrum of a person who learned English as a second language. And then there's a long list of questions that you could use in your interview with them. It's not comprehensive. You could choose different questions you wanted to ask them if you wanted to go kind of a different direction with it. You don't have to ask them all the questions that I listed. But you're basically just going to write a report on what you learned from them based on the interview that you did with them. Right, so we're still in week 0, sorry. So read those major assignment descriptions and all the associated things in those folders, just kind of know what's coming down the pipe. Read chapter 1 in both Brown and in Larson Freeman. Order those textbooks if you haven't ordered them yet. There's a folder called D12 support links for students. So basically, if you've never used the quiz tool in D12 before, if you've never submitted assignments in D12 before, if you've never done a discussion board, there's some helpful links on those things. I think probably all of you have done most of those things at this point, but just in case it's there is a discussion board where you get a chance to introduce yourself, which is a lot of what we did here in person today as well. But it's mostly just to make sure you know how to use the discussion board function before grading. Also creating a free account on Video Amp, so you can follow that link to just see how Video Amp works and make sure that you know how to log into it. It works best on Safari or Chrome. So please, I would especially recommend Chrome actually. I don't think Firefox works. Okay, we go back to the content, that would be 0. There is the link to my Zoom office. So like I said, every Thursday at this class time, I will be in that Zoom if you want to hop on it. I'll also be in our office in the lower level of this building. So please stop by. And like I said, if that's not a great time for you, but you wanted to meet with me about anything regarding this course, just send me an email. We can work at another time. The major assignments, you'll see that there's sort of 2 subfolders, the mini paper, ELL interview, and then the second one, the student-directed language learning journal. We'll talk about that student-directed language learning journal in a couple of weeks before we're about to get started with it. But for now, I really would encourage you to go ahead and look at this assignment description. Like I said, there's a short video of me explaining how you should approach writing that paper. There's a rubric, so you can understand how that'll be graded. And then there's a model. There's someone else's paper that you can have a look at and kind of get a sense of how might I write that paper. But we can look at the assignment description. So for 25%, that's about 10% of your grade in this class. Due September 12th, in just a few weeks. That's why I'm kind of emphasizing that now, even though it's the first day of class, you're like, it's a mini. It's no big deal, but it is due to the 12th. That's probably fairly small print. So you're going to conduct an interview with an ESL student or speaker, someone who uses English as their second language. The purpose is to help you look at ESL learning from a learner's perspective. You may choose any topic related to ESL learning and teaching. But just make sure you know what you want from the interview before you do it, and then focus the interview on a specific area or topic. Maybe when you're talking to them, you end up kind of going down a different road because that's the conversation where the conversation with you, and that's fine. It's a good idea to have your questions in mind and kind of what you're hoping to learn from this person before you sit down with them. Construct a list of questions closely related to the topic before the interview. Stay focused on that during the interview. It's always a good idea to ask the interviewee to provide a specific incident or anecdote. So if they tell you, yeah, it's really hard for me to learn English when I came to this country. I'm sure that's true. Try to see if you can dig a little bit deeper. Like, wow. So, like, what did that look like? Or did you have a teacher you can remember? Or how did other kids in your class treat you? Or ask more sort of questions, trying to get at a specific story or thing of interest that they could share. So this is a list of topics and questions, and it's not a complete list. You could come up with your own questions, or you could focus on a couple of these areas, but on English learning, on English use, so actually how they use English now today, the role of their first language in their life, the role of English in their life. So I won't go through all of these individual questions, but then spend some time looking at this list and this whole assignment description and really start thinking now, who do I think I might interview for this paper? In fact, let me just ask you right now, do you have, raise your hand if you have someone in mind you think you might ask to interview for this paper? So most of us, that's okay. I'll check it again next week. That's one little mini assignment for this week, is to do some mental work thinking about who you might interview. Think about the people you work with. Think about people in your families. Think about people who are friends of your families. If you get really fast, I can help put you in touch with someone that you can interview for this project. But just give that some buttons. You might have someone in your life that you have, well, haven't included in the media. Okay. And then you're going to write a brief report that includes obviously the sort of factual information about the person that you interviewed, when and where this interview was conducted, how long it lasted, kind of just give me the sketch of what was this interaction, an explanation of the purpose or the topic of the interview, and then just a summary of the outcome with an emphasis on what did you learn by talking to this person. Because this might be someone who's in your family you've known all your life, but maybe you've never had this particular conversation with them before. That could be a really valuable opportunity to learn from them. And then also make relevant connections to TESL 341 course content. What are some things that you've been reading about, even just in the first few weeks of this class, in terms of theories or methods or ideas related to language learning that you were able to connect to this person's experience? And it really should just be no more than 5 pages double-spaced. So if you're feeling intimidated about writing this paper at this point, that's not a long paper, and I have full confidence you'll be able to get there. Some people end up just writing that novel about this experience because they felt like they learned so much. That's okay if you want to go that route, but I'm not expecting that. Questions about this mini paper?
If we would need your support and from something with you, what time frame should we
I would suggest that if by the time we meet next week, if you haven't thought of someone and you just don't think you probably will, let me know at that point, and I'll see if I can connect you with someone in our intensive English program. And I would recommend that just so that then there's plenty of time for you to work out your, working out an interview time, giving yourself enough time to write the paper, that kind of thing. Other questions? Do spend some time, like watch the little video that I made, look at the model paper, and that will give you a better idea of what this might be. And then we'll go into module 1, which includes the first 5 weeks of this class. And usually the weeks kind of open on the Tuesday morning of each new week. So only week 1 is available to you right now. But I'll use it as kind of an example. So each week, we'll start with a task list. So if you open up that task list, you will find pretty much it just breaks it down, everything that you should be doing for this week. So read the Brown chapter 1 and Larson Freeman chapter 1. I mentioned the PDFs are available. Make sure to order your books. There's a survey, like a one-page survey that's here in D2L in this week 1 folder. That's about your assumptions around language learning and teaching. So go ahead and download it and do it. It's not like it's just a PDF. So it's not as if it's not like a website. You won't click through to it. You'll just download it and kind of put in your own answers, or maybe even on a separate piece of paper. And then you'll write about it for the week 1 discussion board. So that's due Saturday. And then you're going to reply to 2 colleagues' discussion board posts by Monday. There is a quiz this week, but it's basically a non-graded quiz, and it's not on the content of our reading this week. It's mostly just to make sure you know how to use the quiz function. So go ahead and try it, but it's not graded. Don't stress about it. You're going to find that it's 2 very simple questions. But again, just to make sure you know how to use the quiz function. And then before the following week, go ahead and read chapters 2 and 3 in Larson, Freeman, and Anderson. Again, those PDFs are provided. And watch it or read all the materials in that paper assignment 1 folder and identify some to enter. So in general, you will always find a checklist like this for the week so that you know exactly what you do. Go back into 1. Like I said, here's the Brown chapter 1, here's like Anderson chapter 1. This is today's PowerPoint that we're looking at right now. There's also a second PowerPoint here from my colleague John Armour, so we'll be back in for another class right now. But it's kind of about where TESL 341 fits into the broader field of linguistics. So just if you're interested in kind of placing this class into the bigger picture, that's provided there. That's just optional for your own edification. This assumption survey is the one that you'll need to go ahead and download or open up, do your own answers for it. And then our discussion board this week is just asking you to basically, there are 18 statements on that survey about language learning and teaching. And it's a survey where you rate it from strongly agree to strongly disagree, right? So I'm asking you to identify 3 of those statements that you either strongly agree or strongly disagree. So one that you had a strong reaction to, choose 3 of those out of the 18. And then just write about them, write about why you strongly agree or strongly disagree with 3 of the statements. Okay, about 150 to 200 words, and you're going to post that by Saturday at 11:59, and then you're also going to reply to 2 of your colleagues' posts by Monday. Do this little practice quiz, and then these are the readings for the following. So it's going to be fairly typical of how our weeks will go. We'll meet on Tuesday. There'll be some amount of lectures, some group activities, and then we'll have some of the online activities for the discussion board or video and do Saturday and then replies by Monday. Questions about kind of how the D2L course shell works? Anything else that I've said at all? Feel free to ask. Like I said, each module includes about 5 weeks or 5 units. And then here at the very bottom, there's a few additional required readings beyond our 2 textbooks, so you'll always be able to find those there and typically within whatever week we're in as well. I think that's about it so far as D2L. Okay. I don't think I'll get through all of the slides that I have prepared for you, and that's actually fine. In terms of this first chapter of Larson, Freeman, and Pemberton, there's about 4 key ideas that I think you'll want to take into. Again, I know that probably most of you didn't get a chance to read this first chapter, but as you're reading it, I think these are the 4 things I would have you sort of key into as you are reading. The first of them is that there's a difference between, we're going to hear these words a lot in this class throughout the semester: approaches, methods, and techniques. Approaches, methods, and techniques. And sometimes it's going to get confusing trying to remember what's what between those things, because they all kind of sound similar. So I have this graphic that's maybe going to help us think about what they are, but at the bottom of this is an approach. So an approach is a set of mutually supporting assumptions about the nature of language learning and teaching. So it's kind of our theories about how language learning and teaching should happen. And then coming out of an approach. Oh, so for example, and they talk in the chapter about a couple of different kinds of approach, like cognitive code approach, a communicative approach. We'll discuss what those different things are in the course of this class. But coming out of an approach might be methods. Methods are things that are consistent with these theories, but they're more plans or procedures of how we put an approach into action. So we might have something called a communicative approach, which is based on a theoretical understanding that to learn a language, you have to use it to communicate. You can't just translate documents from one language to another. You have to actually be listening and speaking and trying to communicate something meaningful. That would be something of a communicative approach, but then out of that might come a method called community language learning that's built on that theoretical approach. Two of the first methods we're going to be looking at next week include the grammar translation method and the direct method. Those would be built on different approaches, different theories about how we look. But then also coming out of methods would be techniques. So techniques are the kind of actual activities or things that we do in a classroom that are based on the method that we're instituting in the classroom. So coming out of the grammar translation method, we would use a lot of the L1, first language. We would be doing, like I mentioned, a lot of translating documents to and from the first language to the second language and back again, because that's part of this method. Those are actual techniques. Whereas in the direct method, we would not use the first language at all. We would sort of shun the first language and only focus on using the second language because we're trying to teach ourselves to think in the second language as it were. And very little value is placed on the first language, using it for sort of direct communication in day-to-day life. We'll get into that in great detail next week. But the sort of purpose, and I don't think it's a great graphic in the end, but it's supposed to help us understand this idea that an approach is more like a theoretical basis. A method is the sort of plans and procedures that come out of that theoretical approach. And then the techniques are the actual things we do in the classroom that are part of that. We'll see much more what that means practically as we get into some of these specifics. A second key idea coming out of Larson, Freeman, and Anderson chapter 1 is that for a long time there was an era of kind of strict adherence to a particular method. So a person would be trained to teach using the direct approach, and they would use that method and its technique without deviation. And that we've kind of left that behind. That most language teachers today are teaching with the idea that we can take techniques from a variety of different methods and integrate them into our own eclectic approach to teaching language. And that's a legitimate approach that maybe serves our students better than a very sort of strict adherence to one particular method. And like I said, in fact, the third point in Larson, Freeman, and Anderson is that setting a goal of developing your own eclectic method from bits and pieces of many that we'll learn about is usually the goal of most good language teachers today. And then you'll find in Learn from Freeman and Anderson that she talks about something called the Downer game. Did anyone, and I'm not throwing shade on anybody, did anyone actually read the chapter and could anyone explain the Downer game? I cannot explain the Downer game. Okay. anyone who read it and who thinks they maybe understand what the Downer game is that she talks about. The Doubters game, she would say, is sort of the way that most of us who have Western education have been trained to think sort of critically and suspiciously almost of any new idea, that most new ideas have to be sort of examined and we look for a way to sort of disprove it before we will believe it. That it's best to sort of question any new idea that seems strange or unfamiliar before sort of just adopting it, which is not necessarily a bad idea. There's a good reason that we've been trained to be critical thinkers. However, what Larson, Freeman, and Anderson sort of encourage of us as we read through her book, going through many of the historical language teaching methods, she encourages to try being believers. And by this, she means even when some of the approaches or methods that we're going to read about seem strange or not especially useful or not especially attractive for probably a variety of reasons, her encouragement is there may be a nugget of something good in these methods. There may be some piece of, maybe it's a technique from any of these methods we're going to read about that are actually useful and will be meaningful for our students. And so she challenges us to try to be believers as we go through this semester studying these different methods. Be open to the idea that there's things that we have to learn, even from methods that may have fallen out of fashion. So I'll leave that at that. But that may make more sense as we get into some of these cookier methods, because some of them were real. I think that I will skip a couple slides just so that we can get to this one thing, which is this. On the first page of Brown, chapter 1. So if you brought your laptop or tablet or some way to look at T2L, or if you haven't already had your book, go to that PDF or your book to page 1 in chapter 1 of Brown. And you will see on it, in the opening of that chapter, a description of two language learners, Carson and Sonia. So what I'd like you to do is let's get into two groups, and that way, some of you may not have your book or have access to the PDF right now, and then that's fine. Maybe like this half of the room, these 4 women, and then these 5 students here. Get together, group 1, this side, read that first paragraph about Carson, and this side of the room, read the second paragraph about Sonia. Okay? And then talk with each other about these two questions. What do you speculate to be the causes of success or failure? So each of them are going to share just a really brief thumbnail sketch, or just a brief picture of a student who has attempted to learn a second language. Talk a little bit about why do you think that person was either successful or not so successful at learning the language, and then what might be the implications? What might we be able to learn from that really relates to that we read in terms of thinking about teaching second language? Okay, so this side of the group, or this side of the room, person, it's like Sonia. How their success or failure, and what could we maybe about our own students. Okay. Talk about that for just a few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then we'll share after the class. Okay. Does anyone not understand what I'm asking you to do? Go ahead, Yashar. So if you find the PDF in week 1 of Brown, it's a should be public Brown chapter 1.
I didn't do it. I'm good.
Scroll. Yeah, that should be on page 1.
It's in the first page, the second paragraph.
Is everyone able to find it?
Things, that's it.
I see it.
Right there.
Yep, you got it.
Shuhara Abdullah. Close over here. Good. Oh, I'm good. Good, I appreciate it though. Come on, Angel. Here, Angel. It's actually me. Was that? I see several things. First of all, not having some practice, even though it's family and everything. You're engaged. You're always. You mentioned the paragraph, but she got to an intermediate level speaking, meaning that she had the ability. She had the ability. However, over years, she stopped using the language, passing them into theater.
I think like just beyond like her like not having like an interest in it, it was more like forced on her by her parents.
That's it. When you're forced to do something, you can learn it very well. Sure, rather than something. The reason it says similar meaning different means is because I speak it, but only on like a script. So I'm like tourist level. Before I used to learn to speak a little more, but that was many years ago. Whereas compared to Spanish and English that I use every day, I speak both of them fluently. Yeah, I grew up with Spanish and so I use my Spanish a lot. I don't want to forget my Spanish. I waited. That's funny too because what's implications like in one sort of implication? I mean, interactions spark the interaction. We're looking past part speaking outside of class, seek material that's just in the language. When I was studying Japanese or even Italian, I picked up music in Italian and Japanese. I would read children's books in Italian. I took that not so much Japanese because it's really hard to read Japanese. I can't read Japanese on the basics level. It's but it was fun. The professor was incredible. It wasn't here, it wasn't incredible. But yes, I'm thinking the interaction. Like related to today, I still read Spanish newspaper. I still watch the news in Spanish. I still listen to music in Spanish. Exactly.
If I had more, if I had more.
Are you guys all too? You learn English?
Hmm.
Yeah. How long ago?
I think when I was younger, when I started preschool at the daycare I went to, that's when I learned English. And then I went to preschool, and then I think I have little knowledge already because of the daycare I went to.
Yeah.
They were
So
speaking to me in English and their native language, so I was interacting with more languages.
like it's like probably from the start. Oh. What way?
But I was not really good at it until I came to inspection back in 2017. So, yeah.
What are you doing?
We just known it.
Oh, you was in London. Were you born here?
Yeah.
I learned when I was 7. That was 20 years ago. I started when I came into the United States. The English program was it's not as good as it used to be. It was a fun learning experience.
Okay, so maybe let's, at this point, just, I know there's probably rich conversations to go on for a long time about, all of your language learning experiences, but, because we have limited time, I'm interested to hear. So this group was talking about Sonia. So tell us what you think, maybe tell us a little bit about Sonia from this paragraph that you read, and then why she might have been successful or less successful learning the language that she was attempting to.
What we discussed, Sonia seems to have the language pushed on her
Okay,
rather than her wanting to learn it by herself.
why do you say that?
Because what was it?
Okay, so her parents seem to want her to learn this language, which was
German.
German. Okay, so she's a native of Brazil, right? Her parents were German. They seem to want her to learn this, so there wasn't maybe as much internal motivation. Okay, what else? What in what ways maybe was she more or less successful, and why?
So from the information we read, we can tell that she got to a intermediate level,
Okay.
knowing the language and everything.
Uh-huh.
But over the years, which was 10 years later, her reading ability is okay, her listening ability is okay, and her speaking is poor. I suggested that this is because there was no more interaction of her with the language.
Okay.
So we're in the learning environment, we're always interacting with that language we are learning. For her, after dropping the language, there was really possibly minimal interaction to no interaction over the 10 years.
Yeah. Any of you group members, is there something you would add to that? the question you had about that.
I think like it said that it was just like, it was like a thing that just wasn't like practical for her. She learned how to speak. She was like able to interact with her parents and grandparents,
Uh-huh.
like at conversational level, but outside of that, like it's something she would like have to like force like the interaction with the language.
So it wasn't, there was nothing happening in her life beyond maybe sometimes interacting with her parents in that language, but there was no other sort of reason for her to use it. There was no structure for taking the classes. There was no structure that was forcing her or giving her opportunity to interact with German, reading, writing, listening, or speaking. So once that sort of stopped, the growth stopped, as well as probably she lost some breath, right? That she probably gained at a certain point by just not listening. There was no interaction. Yeah. So then what might be some of the implications when we think about, okay, this is what a little something we learned about Sonia and her experience, which was maybe not so great. So what's something we would take away then from that when we're thinking about L2 learners in our classrooms? What is some of the things that we could learn from Sonia's experience that we would want to be remembered?
Seeking those interactions, like communication, using the language more. But there's resources. I mentioned like when I learned Italian and Japanese, I was listening to music, I was reading children's books, I was watching shows in that language, so I can pick up the pronunciations and further develop my language. And even for my Spanish, because I don't want to forget it, I find myself reading in Spanish, watching the news in Spanish, listening to music, yeah, so I can retain that what's called fluency of the language.
So I think you said a lot of important things there, Manny, including the need for interaction, right? The need to be continuing to use, and I think the word you use is communication, that there has to be something meaningful for a person to be communicating in this language and not just sort of doing grammar exercises, but something meaningful to communicate. And then I think something I heard you say, Manny, was like probably at home you're using Spanish a lot, but you mentioned beyond just sort of home talk, reading the news, reading book or listening to the news, reading books, right? Using Spanish, using a language in a way, in a broader way than you might naturally experience it beyond just sort of home communication, which is so valuable in itself, but it might be limiting, right? You might not be getting the kind of vocabulary or the kind of sentence structure in talking to your parents that you would get in reading a book, listening to the news, etc.
As I mentioned, for me, I can speak and read Italian. I can also have a good conversation in Italian. However, with Japanese, I have a script, so I can't talk fluently. If a question that I don't know comes up, I can answer it. And if someone speaks to me, I can pick up little bits and pieces. But it's not fluent, it's non-existent at that point. Like tourist level, I like to call it tourist level Japanese.
And I think you said something important. When we get to a method called the audiolingual method, we'll learn a lot about people who've learned languages sort of through the use of scripts, through the use of very specific words and phrases repeated again and again, which can be useful for using those words and phrases. But once you get to the point of wanting to say anything else that you don't have a script for, those go-to words and phrases, then often that method breaks down because it hasn't prepared you to do what you said, which is use a novel utterance, a new thing that you want to communicate that you didn't learn by script. Thank you to this group. What about this group of Carson? Tell us a little bit about Carson, what Carson was maybe more or less successful.
Okay. So, first of all, valuable time in Congress, we're able to so meaningful that we really
Tell us what you mean about, or what you mean by important. Well, they were, okay.
So that in itself needs to really communicate in that way. That kind of communication and interaction, those are real. They're not syntax or they're real life. And that's to be more, a little more,
Okay. So the impetus to use Spanish for person was to communicate about something meaningful, a shared task or goal, right? They were trying to accomplish a project. And so it was meaningful or important to be able to communicate about this thing, not necessarily utilize the script or use the grammar exercise, but how do I communicate my message, be understood, and then understand what's inside of me as well. You said something also about motivation, and maybe the rest of you remember seems to like why person might have had more motivation than maybe someone. Yeah. Well, and what we learned a little bit about Sonia, she's in Portugal, or no, sorry, in Brazil, or the main language in Portuguese. And her parents wanted to learn German. She had this sort of family sense that she should learn German. But where was Carson when he was really learning Spanish? In Costa Rica. What Spanish? What language are they speaking around in Costa Rica? Spanish, right? So part of this motivation is the circumstances that sort of said to him, I use Spanish or I don't communicate with anyone around me, right? Whereas Sonia can learn out the door and use German behind at any time, right? Because that's not the dominant language where she was operating. So the circumstances can also greatly impact someone's motivation and someone's either external or internal motivation, right? So he had this experience sort of needing to use it, even though he had studied it, right? He had done, classes in Spanish before then, and it was even he said like a little bit of a leg up when he got there. He had a baseline of some vocabulary, probably. But the whole opportunity for learning changed dramatically when it was sort of like, well, I'm going to be able to accomplish my goal, communicate with peers that I'm motivated to talk to, etc. I'm gonna have to use them. So there was really a lot of learning that happened. So what might be some implications then? What could we take away from Carson's experience when we're thinking about students in our own classroom who are learning English? I'm knowing more about that. Why do they want to? Yes, that's a hugely important question that we should be asking about all of our students and not necessarily assuming, right, that we know the reason that they want to learn English, but really trying to understand our students' particular goals and motivations that can be seen in their success or lack of success. Great. What other things can we take away from the experience of Sonia as we think about students in our own classes? Or no, of Carson. Sorry. That's I'm sorry. Teresa Carson when we think about students in our classes. Other things that we might have learned from his experience.
I mean, if you can have opportunities, providing opportunities understand and also I was like, wow, something.
Yeah, years, right?
How could you do that so long and so late?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
And then person spent a little bit.
Yeah, 2 months, right? Roughly, right? Like not a lot of time, but at this enormous. Right? But Charlotte, would you add anything to that in terms of what we might take away from my experience? intentionally sort of said, I'm gonna go all in on this and do my best, right? And I think maybe even one more thing that we can start to think about is the task-based nature of what he was doing, that they had this shared project, the Lindy Thousand, that they had to use Spanish together for, led to a lot of really meaningful interaction because they had to accomplish that goal. And it was almost like language learning became in service to this other goal, which was the project. And sometimes taking the focus off the language learning itself, putting it onto a project, can make it more possible for language learning to occur, almost as a secondary outcome of that situation. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about much later. Okay, that's probably what we can pull from that. So here's what I'm going to say. We are at time. So I didn't get through many slides. What I'm going to do is post to our D12 course shelf. I think I have about a 20-minute recorded lecture on some of the material from Brown Chapter 1 and Martin Freeman Anderson Chapter 1. So I'll make that available in D12 so you can get the whole overview of Brown 1 and Martin Freeman Anderson 1. But for this week, just make sure that discussion board posts and replies, and then really just go through that week 1 task list and make sure you do those things. And then you'll be good.
I have one small one.
Please go ahead. Start it again. You mean oh no, it's not. If you want to keep the conversation going, by all means, but not. Thanks, everybody. It's great to meet you all.
Good to see you again. Sorry about today. I got my stick on this one. I was on the break room upstairs. What room are we? So we're in 43. Thank you very much.
Bye.